storytellers. Imagine if I came to Frankfurt and I am like, oh no, this is going to be Kashilova town. Already you don't understand what that means because it's Frankfurt, it's German. So the first thing is to take away Lutherans, because we have ovaHerero, like we have native names for all the towns, right? Like what he was explaining. That's the first thing, right? So our government, we need friends of the genocide to make noise like what we're doing with the street names. That's the very first thing. Because how do you discover Lutherans when there were inhabitants there? How do you discover Namibia when you had people, like were we lost? No? We were there. You just decided. And before you continue, I was very strategic right now to asking if you guys could speak English. Because I know that you guys can speak English. Now imagine I come here and I just start speaking ovaHerero and I demand you speak ovaHerero. And I give you an ovaHerero name, every single, okay, Pahe, Vuve, Shalishe, Mutima, like everybody gets a Herero name. Everybody's like, oh, everybody's getting a car, everybody's getting a car, no, everybody's getting a Herero name. Do you see how far-fetched that is? It doesn't connect. So these are the things about decolonizing things. Like we teach in the schools the real history. We really have like a whole chapter and a whole a history on it. Not just a chapter, maybe like, so that is what we can start doing, not just in Namibia, but here as well. And not to blame, to have the blame, because we have a relationship. You have cousins back in Namibia, guys, whether you like it or not. We're family, right? Let's just get that out of the way. We don't think of it, but it's the truth, right? So let's have the proper conversations in terms of, okay, what can we do? Try and think about what it actually means for you to be uncomfortable and still be taught funny things about your religion and all of that, and say, okay, but if I'm not comfortable with that, what would comfortability look like? Check yourself first. And if you're very uncomfortable, check what would make you comfortable. That's the first thing, because it's not easy to tell you, oh, we need 10 schools, we need 5 hospitals, we need, yes, maybe, but is that really what we need? The two groups, right? Because we also have victims of war, the other tribes, but the genocide was specific to the 2 tribes. That's just to add to that very first question about what do we want, and I just wanted to say that before. The farms, because the German settlers on those farms would have guns. Standard questions that everybody is getting for census. How many people live here? Who's working? How many people are under the age of what? They would stand with guns. We have video evidence. You cannot come into my land. This is my property. The rights of enter whatever the reserves by. And you're like, I can't say, I just said a lot of words right now in my head that I can't say out loud. And you're like, but this is still the same thing. And police will come and whatnot, but then somebody on top, they will be like, no, it's okay. We will give you the statistics of that farm. And it's not the right amount of, because there's still slavery happening in those farms. Why do I say slavery? Because the people that are working there are underpaid. They live in shacks to maintain these farms. There's no affirmative action still in those farms, and they pick and choose a lot of the other tribes, not the Herero tribe, because we will tell you, like we prepared.
I'm not moved by the German time. So I will come. I traveled 2 days to get here, so I'm good. Imagine. I'm just saying. Imagine if you needed a key to come into my house, but I could enter your house anytime without a key. It's uncomfortable, right? Because I'm a thief that can come out anytime and I can do anything. I need a visa to come here. But the Germans don't need a visa to come to Namibia. That's the one thing we could, with good partners with activism. And I was so frustrated, and I was Julia and Tim were like my backbones. I'm like, at this point I need a shot of whiskey. The difficult questions I get at the embassy with the German people there and some of the Namibian people there, just to come here, I need to show evidence of a return ticket, I need to have a letter, invitation letter that has to, and they look at the letter, I need proof of my bank statements of 3 months, I need a letter from my work that I'm gonna return back to work. after this trip, that they know that I'm on it. I need to give my leave letter that is signed, not just by me, by my supervisor, by my director, by my, just to show that I'm gonna go back. Yet you guys can just say that, Namibia the next holiday. That's one of the conversations we could have, because it's not fair if we are cousins by blood, right? To the post-traumatic slave syndrome. So PTSD has to do with any traumatic experiences that we've discovered that a person had gone through, be it childhood trauma. I think PTSD was mostly seen, especially with the soldiers, vividly for people to understand that there were traumatic things that soldiers saw or had to go through, and when they come back, the silence becomes loud because it's recurring memories, and we share all of that. And then people are trying to do better in terms of helping people for PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, right? Now, the post-traumatic slave syndrome is a word that was coined by Professor Joy DeGruy. She's an American, a Black American professor in the social work space. So when I was in the States, I was studying addiction science and what it does to the brain, because we do have addictions. I used to work in the rehab, and I worked with the soldiers, hence PTSD, a lot, because I couldn't understand. And at the time, some even soldiers that were part of the Zaire, now DRC era, so couldn't understand the gambling and the sex and the drinking and the drugging, but it was just to numb the noise because they couldn't handle what happened or what they did. So I went to the States for the program, but then when I was there, I was intrigued by the Black Americans, because I felt more close with the white people, which was so weird, versus the blacks, because there was a push against us, and then I needed to understand what that was about. And then for somehow, listening to podcasts and this, I came about this lady who spoke about the post-traumatic slave syndromes, and that looks at the 400 years of slavery for the American Black people was so structurally put that if Julia, for example, takes Panado or ibuprofen, a painkiller, right, in a tablet form, they said it's cocaine, right? She would get like 3 years in prison. But if I take the same one and I crush it and it's found as powder, I get like 20 years, just because of my skin color. So the anxiety and stress, it was structured systematically to arrest more Black male and all of this. But then it spoke to so much of stress and anxiety and trust and segregating males from homes so that children grow up dysfunctional without the male figure in it, and that what respect meant, you need to see me, you need to recognize, there's so much that happened with the slave trade, because the biggest thing with slave trade was to divide and conquer. So you would have somebody from, let's say Namibia as an example, and somebody from South Africa, because we don't speak the same language, so that you just don't understand each other, so that you can't, fight. So with the post-traumatic slave syndrome, it looks at what are the effects of intergenerational trauma look like now on the Black community. For example, a lot of hip-hop music in the US, it's not about the songs, it's about the sex. You would find Black women still being very provocative and half naked and all this for sex sells. We're still taking it back to the rape era, right? Because that is what is appealing. So small things like that. So it speaks to that. So I would encourage you to look at post-traumatic slave syndrome by Dr. Gray. And there's a lot of information there that spoke so much about what are some of the things. And I spoke about, for the Americans, it's 400 years of post-slavery. For us, it's about 185 years only. So we're still in that space of, we haven't been studied, and I'd love to do studying that. What are the things? Why we're so, and I say we, I speak only about the ovaHerero people, because we are seen as very arrogant and dominant and not scared of anything, and we will check you. And it's part of, you've killed us, and we survived, and you can't still, oppress me. Like, it's a casual word we use in Oshierero, we've killed us a long time ago, but we're still standing. But it's also, then there comes the fear of, do I really plan ahead? Because I don't know if I'm going to survive. So you might not have a lot of school dropouts with your ovaHerero kids in high school and versus university, because like the concept of planning and actually acquiring something could be scary, because we might die. So all of these small psychological issues are there, but it hasn't been studied, right? So this is what I picked up in It was quite interesting. I'd love to do more in terms of my community to see what that looks like, and then how also then healing looks like properly based on empirical evidence, right? Not just lived experiences. I hope that answers you.
Okay, so many